You're waiting for clarity, that perfect moment, that green light from the universe, that sudden sweeping sense of certainty that says, yes, now is the time. But what if that moment never comes? What if clarity isn't the beginning, but the reward? What if it only shows up after you move, after you act, after you obey the whisper before it becomes a roar? You keep sitting still calling it strategy. You keep hesitating calling it wisdom. But deep down you know it's not strategy. It's stalling. And clarity has no obligation to meet you there. The people who build extraordinary lives aren't the ones who had the clearest vision from the start. They're the ones who moved anyway. They felt the fear, the fog, the uncertainty, and they still took the step. They understood that direction doesn't come from waiting. It comes from walking. You don't get answers in comfort. You get answers in obedience, in movement, in showing up when there's no applause, no spotlight, no guaranteed outcome. Look back through history. Edison didn't wait for clarity before inventing the light bulb. He moved through 10,000 failures to find it. Ford didn't wait for the market to beg for cars. He created the future before it could see itself. Walt Disney didn't wait for someone to hand him a clear path. He imagined worlds when he could barely feed himself. They didn't wait for clarity. They moved in obedience to something louder than logic, a calling. That's what obedience is. It's not blind submission. It's not religious rhetoric. It's alignment to the highest voice within you, to the vision that doesn't always make sense on paper, but makes your chest burn every time you try to ignore it. And yet most people spend their lives waiting for a sign, waiting for validation, waiting for conditions to be right. But listen carefully. Perfect conditions don't create progress. Movement does. You're not stuck because you don't know. You're stuck because you refuse to move without knowing. But that's not how leaders live. That's not how greatness is built. It's not forged in certainty. It's forged in conviction. Conviction is louder than clarity. Conviction doesn't ask for evidence. It acts like the result is already written. And the great ones, they don't wait to feel ready. They act until readiness becomes identity. You don't need another opinion. You need obedience to the vision you've already been given, to the gift that won't leave you alone, to the nagging idea that keeps you awake at night because it refuses to die in your silence. That is your path. That is your assignment. But it will never become real until you obey. And yes, obedience is uncomfortable. It demands movement without certainty. It demands that you sacrifice your craving for perfection at the altar of momentum. It's not about knowing how. It's about trusting who. You don't obey because it's clear. You obey because it's calling. And calling doesn't owe you the full map. It hands you a shovel and says, start digging. And only after you dig long enough does the foundation reveal itself. The greatest mistake people make is thinking clarity is the prerequisite to action. It's not. It's the consequence. If you want clarity, get to work. If you want certainty, take the first step. If you want confidence, earn it in the trench. Not the journal. Not the meditation cushion. Not the vision board. There is no affirmation strong enough to replace aligned action. There is no quote powerful enough to replace discipline. You will not become who you're meant to be by waiting. You will become it by becoming moment by moment, decision by decision. Even if you stumble, even if you fail, even if you build the wrong thing first, it is better to be a builder with blisters than a dreamer with clean hands and an unfinished life. Look around. How many people do you know still talking about what they'll do, still dreaming, still planning, still waiting for one more book, one more course, one more confirmation? They've made a religion out of indecision. But you were made for movement. Obedience doesn't wait for emotions to catch up. It doesn't ask, do I feel ready? It simply says, if it's mine to build, I begin now. The world doesn't change because of people who plan. It changes because of people who move. Every legacy begins with a single act of obedience. Not clarity, not applause. Obedience. The man who steps forward in obedience may look foolish to the world, but history will call him a pioneer. Every innovator, every visionary, every disruptor who was told, "You're going the wrong way," proved them wrong not by arguing, but by building anyway. So, what's your excuse? That you don't know enough? That you're not ready? That you need more research? Let me tell you the truth. Your fear is masquerading as logic, and your logic is killing your future. Obedience doesn't always feel wise. Sometimes it feels reckless, but there's a difference between recklessness and alignment. When your soul is screaming to move, when every cell in your body feels the tension of being still, when your peace is hiding behind a decision you refuse to make. You don't need a sign. You are the sign. You are the permission you've been waiting for. You are the green light. You are the catalyst, the messenger, the one chosen to bring the unseen into existence. But none of that matters if you don't move. Every time you delay action, you're sending your subconscious a message. I don't trust myself yet. I'm not capable yet. I need more proof before I move. But the longer you wait for proof, the longer you stay outside your own purpose. Faith without works is dead. Desire without decision is useless. Vision without movement is fantasy. You don't manifest a different future by sitting in the same chair. You manifest it by stepping even when the step feels shaky, even when the path looks incomplete. There is no revelation without responsibility. And clarity will never feel close until obedience becomes your posture. The greatest lie modern ambition tells you is that you need confidence to act. You don't. You need courage. Confidence is what you gain after you've moved through fear, not before. And courage. It doesn't come with comfort. It's born inside the furnace of uncertainty when you move, not because it feels good, but because something inside you says, "This is mine to do." You're not here to analyze your way to transformation. You're here to build your way through it, step by step, day by day, unseen, uncelebrated, unshakable. You think obedience means submission to a higher authority, but real obedience is submission to your higher self, the version of you that doesn't flinch when it's time to choose. The version of you that doesn't seek applause because they're too busy executing. The version of you that honors the whisper, the pull, the ache to evolve. And when you ignore that version long enough, life gets louder. It doesn't punish you, it pressures you. Because the longer you stay in disobedience, the heavier the weight of what you could have been. And that weight, it doesn't show up all at once, it builds in silence. In the quiet frustration, in the unseen regrets, in the moments where you catch yourself scrolling and you realize, I was made for more than this. So obey. Not because you know every detail, not because you're confident in every outcome, but because you're tired of waiting for a life that only responds to action. What if your future was waiting on one decision you keep postponing? What if your breakthrough wasn't missing, just ignored? There is no such thing as not ready. You are as ready as your willingness to move. You've already been told what to do, not by someone else, but by the fire inside you that won't shut up. And it won't shut up until you finally say, "Fine, I'll move." And when you do, everything shifts. Not because the world changes, but because you stopped waiting for it to. Because you decided to become the one who moves with or without proof, with or without praise. Every legend was once a person who moved before they had all the answers. Clarity came after, always after. Abraham Lincoln didn't know the end of the road. He just knew slavery was wrong. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't wait for a plan, he moved with purpose and created one along the way. Nelson Mandela moved even when it meant losing everything because obedience to justice was louder than fear of consequence. And now their names live forever, because obedience always leaves evidence. But you don't need to change the world. You just need to change yours. Your room, your habits, your systems, your morning, your decision-making, your personal contract with your own future. And that begins now, not when it's easy, but when it's required. Stop praying for a sign when you're holding the tools. Stop waiting for clarity when obedience is the signal your future needs to hear. It's not about the pace. It's about the posture. The posture of someone who says, "I'll show up before I feel certain. I'll build before I see progress. I'll become before they believe." Let others keep overthinking. You execute. Let others chase certainty. You chase alignment. Let others scroll. You stack. Because here's the truth. While most people drown in indecision, the builders rise. While most wait for applause, the pioneers create results. While most freeze in fear, the few obey the call. And that's why obedience is power. Because it makes you move when others are still waiting to understand. You don't need to know. You need to trust. There's a reason your vision feels sacred. It was given to you, not them. That's why they don't understand it. That's why it doesn't make sense on paper. That's why it burns inside you and no one else. Stop asking people to validate a vision they weren't given. Stop asking for confirmation from minds built to protect, not pioneer. Stop seeking clarity in places where only obedience will unlock progress. You know what needs to be done. And if you don't know exactly what to do the part you do know. Because movement creates momentum. And momentum breaks the chains of doubt. You are not stuck. You are stalling. And the moment you move, the chains fall off. You'll feel it. Not all at once, but in the little ways. The way you start waking up with energy again, the way your mind begins to open, the way your feet feel planted again, not drifting, not waiting, because you're back in alignment, not with emotion, but with obedience. And that's all you need to begin. Let's get something straight. Obedience is not weakness. Obedience is not passive. It's the boldest move you can make in a world addicted to hesitation. To obey is to declare war on delay. To obey is to say, I choose alignment over approval. I choose movement over motivation. I choose calling over comfort. Because that's what's required. Not ease, not hype, not more followers, more books, more information. What's required is courage, the kind that doesn't show up loud but arrives in the quiet. When no one's watching, when no one claps, when it's just you and the decision you've been dodging. This is the crossroads. You know the one. The invisible line between who you've been and who you're becoming. The line between I'm thinking about it and I'm doing it. The line between wishing and willing. And here's the secret no one tells you. You don't cross that line with a plan. You cross it with faith. Not the kind you talk about. The kind you walk in. The kind that shows up when the path disappears. The kind that says, I'd rather fall in forward motion than die in stillness. You want a different life? Then move like it's already yours. You don't manifest by waiting. You manifest by mirroring your future self now. By becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to be told. Who doesn't beg for clarity. Who just gets to work quiet, focused, clear. Obedience sharpens your edge. It silences the noise. It makes you immune to the opinions of the small-minded. Because when you're building something, real distractions become obvious. The voices that once scared you start sounding ridiculous, because you're no longer operating at their level. You're building from a place they haven't earned the right to understand. Let them watch. Let them doubt. Let them scroll while you stack. The same people questioning your obedience today will study your discipline tomorrow. But by then, you won't need their recognition. you'll have something far more powerful. Evidence. The proof that you moved when it wasn't clear. The proof that you built when it wasn't easy. The proof that you didn't need certainty, you just needed conviction. And conviction is rare. That's why you feel different. You're not meant to fit. You're meant to build what doesn't exist yet. So build. In the dark, in the unknown, in the chaos. Obedience doesn't wait for the world to make sense. It builds sense into the world. Your habits, obedience. Your boundaries, obedience. Your systems, obedience. Your early mornings, your quiet evenings, your discipline. When no one's watching, that's not routine. That's reverence. Reverence for the person you're becoming. Reverence for the life you're being entrusted to create. But don't expect it to feel good at first. Obedience feels like breaking, like sacrifice, like letting go of every excuse that once gave you permission to stay safe. You will feel the loss, the death of the someday version of you, the death of the potential that never had to face pressure. But don't fear that, because on the other side of that death is real identity. Not the one you post about, the one you live in. And identity is what makes discipline effortless. Because when you are the builder, you don't have to try anymore. You do. There's no more debate. No more should I. You've already decided. You move like someone who doesn't flinch. You walk like someone who doesn't retreat. Because obedience gave you something clarity never could command. You no longer ask for a better life. You build it, brick by brick. Not for the world, but for the one who wakes up with you. The one who looks back at you in the mirror and says, "We're not quitting today. We're becoming." And when it gets hard, because it will, when no one sees your effort, when the fog rolls in and the voices start again, don't run. That's the test. That's the resistance every legend has faced. It's not the world fighting you, it's the old you refusing to let go. But that voice isn't your truth. It's your training ground. It's the last breath of the version of you who never finishes, who always waits, who always hides behind clarity as an excuse to stay comfortable. But you're not them anymore. You've outgrown that story. And now it's time to bury it not with a speech, but with a standard. You move regardless. You show up anyway. You do the thing before you feel ready. And you become ready by doing it. You act like the person you've been praying to become. And you keep acting like them until it's no longer acting. It's identity. That's what obedience unlocks. Not just results, but reinvention. You begin to see yourself differently. And the moment you believe it, the world has no choice but to follow. Because energy doesn't lie. And the person who obeys their calling becomes magnetic, not through performance, but through presence. And you can feel it, can't you? That pull, that quiet fire. You're done waiting, done hesitating, done asking for a sign, because you've always had it. And now, you finally know what to do. It begins with one move, a small one, a phone call you've avoided, an email you need to send, a habit you promised to build, a decision you've been pushing to next week for the past 3 years. Do it now, not because you're ready, but because you're finally done waiting, done watching others do what you know you're capable of, done reading books while your purpose collects dust, done using planning as a shield against progress, done calling perfectionism standards when it's really just fear in disguise. Today you switch roles, from consumer to creator, from watcher to worker, from doubter to doer. This is the tipping point, where one move becomes many, where a whisper becomes a rhythm, where clarity stops being your prerequisite and starts becoming your shadow. Because when you obey what's already been placed inside of you, the road builds itself beneath your feet. You don't need the whole staircase, you just need one step and the willingness to take it. That willingness is what separates legacy from regret. Not brilliance, not perfection, just raw, rugged, relentless obedience. Every empire began with uncertainty. The builders didn't know how, they just knew why. And they moved in the dark with enough fire in their gut to light the way forward. Look at Carnegie, born in a one-room cottage in Scotland. Poor, unconnected, unlikely, but he didn't wait for clarity. He moved with discipline. He studied opportunity, chased discomfort, stacked decisions, until the steel of his mind forged the steel of America. Look at Henry Ford. They laughed when he said a motorized carriage could replace a horse. But he moved, not with certainty, but with obsession. And the world eventually caught up to his belief. That's what you need now. Not a plan, not a motivational spike, not the perfect system. You need obsession with the next right step. The kind that says, I don't care if I'm misunderstood. I don't care if they mock me. I don't care if I fail forward 100 times, I will still not stand still. Because you've tried standing still, you've tasted the regret of knowing what to do, knowing who you could be, knowing you were built for more, but playing smaller because the details weren't clear yet. Obedience doesn't ask for details. It demands devotion. And devotion is where transformation begins. When you're done performing for applause, done starting and stopping, done negotiating with laziness, done betraying the future version of you just to keep the present one comfortable. That's obedience, not the easy path, the necessary one. It feels like isolation, like deleting distractions, like saying no to things that once felt safe, like protecting your time with a level of intensity the average person won't understand. But here's the truth, average won't understand excellence, and excellence won't wait for average to catch up. Let them scroll, let them spectate, let them analyze what you're doing. You're not building for them. You're building for the part of you that refuses to live another year on the sidelines. And one day, they'll ask how you did it, and you'll smile. Not because it was easy, but because you finally stopped waiting for permission to be great. You stopped asking the world to give you clarity, and you gave it to yourself by becoming the kind of person who moves regardless. That's where all power comes from, a decision you make in private that echoes through every part of your life. So move, even if your hands are shaking, even if your voice trembles, even if your plan is incomplete. Move with trembling courage, with quiet fire, with ruthless obedience to what you were built for. Because this life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get another round. And clarity may never tap you on the shoulder and say, it's time. It was time. The moment that vision chose you. You've been entrusted with something sacred, a calling, a mission, a voice that sounds like your own, but speaks from a deeper place. So why are you still hesitating? Clarity is not coming to rescue you, because clarity was never the rescuer you were. And every second you spend sitting in stillness, waiting for the clouds to part, you abandon the power that obedience could have built. No more waiting. No more spiritual procrastination. No more dressing up your delay in productivity. This is the moment where you move. Not for hype, not for hustle, not for applause, but because you finally had enough of the half-lived life. Your future isn't waiting for a better economy. It's not waiting for a smoother schedule. It's not waiting for everything to calm down. It's waiting for you to believe, to act, to obey. You don't need perfect. You need presence. You don't need more signs. You need standards. You don't need clarity to begin. You need courage to break the loop. And the loop breaks now. This is the real breakthrough. Not some viral moment. Not the overnight success. Not the applause of strangers who didn't build with you. No, this moment right here. The quiet one. Where no one's watching. Where the lights are off and your mind is loud. Where your excuses come to die and your character comes to life. That's what obedience unlocks. It doesn't just build results, it builds you. The real you beneath the layers of delay, doubt, and distractions that have diluted your potential for far too long. You've been searching for power. But power doesn't show up when conditions are perfect. It shows up when you say, "I'll move anyway." That's where you become untouchable. Because the world can take your money, your comfort, your audience, but it can't take your standard. And when obedience becomes your standard, you don't need discipline to feel like a burden. It becomes your rhythm. You stop thinking about whether or not you'll show up. You just do, because you've rewired your identity. And identity always beats emotion. Always. The old you. They made decisions based on feelings. They waited until things felt right. They needed external clarity before internal movement. But the new you move based on conviction. You move because you said you would. You move because you're no longer available for the version of you who keeps hesitating. And that's when the world shifts. Not because it changes, but because you do. You stop chasing transformation and start living it. You stop begging for the map and start paving your own trail. That's what builders do. They stop waiting for doors to open and start knocking holes in walls. And when you live like that, when your obedience becomes so loud that it drowns out the fear, you become dangerous in the best way possible. Not to others, to limitation, to mediocrity, to the story that said, maybe someday, because you no longer play by the old rules. You've written a new code. I move without needing approval. I build without waiting for permission. I follow the call even when it's quiet. And in that code you find your edge. Not just for performance, but for purpose. This is the kind of fire that doesn't burn out. Because it's not fueled by hype, it's fueled by alignment. And alignment lasts. When your calendar reflects your values, when your environment supports your elevation, when your thoughts, your actions, and your habits are all speaking the same truth, you become a force. Unstoppable, grounded, focused. Not because you finally got clarity, but because you stopped needing it. You found something better, something most people never touch in their lifetime. Obedient momentum, where the work no longer feels like a grind. It feels like becoming. Where the challenge no longer feels like pressure. It feels like preparation. Where the fear no longer blocks you, it builds you. And now everything starts to shift. Not in huge ways, in subtle, sacred ways. You get up earlier. You move with urgency. You speak with weight. You stop entertaining distractions, excuses, and conversations that belong to the old you. You don't even recognize them anymore. And people will start to notice. They'll say, "You've changed." They'll ask, "What happened?" And you'll smile not because you owe them an answer, but because you know the truth. You stopped waiting. You started obeying. You obeyed the instinct. You obeyed the restlessness. You obeyed the higher voice inside of you that said, "Enough. Go become what you were born to build." That voice is never wrong. It might be terrifying. It might be disruptive. But it's never wrong. And when you finally submit to it fully, ruthlessly, without apology, that's when life opens. Not all at once, but piece by piece. One habit, one call, one prayer, one system, one ordinary act, done with extraordinary consistency. That's the real difference between those who build legacies and those who waste lifetimes. Obedience to the boring, reverence for repetition, devotion to discipline when no one sees. You want mastery. You want peace. You want the life that makes others stop and say, "How did you do it?" Then build it in silence. Obey in the shadows, and let the results be so loud that you never have to explain yourself again. You don't owe the world your process. You owe the world your proof. So stay locked in. Stay committed. Stay obedient, not to motivation, not to moods, but to mission. And let that mission become sacred. Let it become the non-negotiable part of your day, your schedule, your standard. Because it's not just work anymore, it's worship. Worship of the highest version of you. Worship of the purpose you were placed here to live. Worship of the fire that refuses to die, no matter how long you tried to smother it. That fire is your assignment, and it's time to answer it. This is where the old you ends, not in drama, not in a storm, but in a moment like this, quiet, decisive, irreversible. Because at some point, growth stops looking like ambition and starts looking like obedience to that higher voice, to that deeper instinct, to that non-negotiable version of you that's been whispering for years. We were never meant to live small. And now you finally listen, not just with your ears, with your decisions, with your daily patterns, with the way you speak, the way you move, the way you show up to your life like it matters, because it does. You don't need a miracle. You need obedience to your mission long enough to let the miracle take root. Obedience is not the shortcut. It's the long road, walked with full conviction. It's showing up on day 1 and again on day 100 with the same fire. It's saying, I don't care how long it takes. I just won't live in disobedience anymore. Because disobedience costs more than time. It costs peace. It costs alignment. It costs you the opportunity to know what you could have become. Had you just started, you've already paid enough. In hesitation, in overthinking, in all the days you said I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow has become your addiction. But the cure isn't another delay, it's a decision. A decision to move before you're certain, to build before it's popular, to commit before you're comfortable. Because clarity doesn't reward the passive. It responds to those who walk toward it with faith in their chest and fire in their spine. And when you do that, when you obey what you were built to do, the entire world starts bending around your momentum. People show up. Opportunities align. The resistance that used to stop you becomes the very pressure that sculpts you, because you've become a different person. Not someone who waits, someone who moves, who creates, who leads. That shift from delay to discipline, from wandering to walking, that's the origin story of every icon, every innovator, every world changer. They obeyed when no one else believed. They moved when no one else understood. And that obedience became their authority. But don't mistake this for ego. Obedience isn't about proving, it's about becoming. You're not here to prove your worth. You're here to embody your calling, to take the raw materials of your pain, your talent, your vision, and forge them into a life that speaks before you even open your mouth. Let your habits speak. Let your work ethic speak. Let your consistency be the loudest thing about you. Not for likes, not for clout, for you. Because at the end of your life, the question will not be, how did they feel about you? It will be, did you obey what you were called to do or not? And make no mistake, you were called. Not randomly, not accidentally. You were selected for a mission, a vision, a contribution that only you can carry out the way you were designed to. That fire in your chest, that ache in your gut, that recurring idea that won't leave you alone. That is not imagination, that is instruction. You don't need to keep asking what you're here to do. You've already been told. Now it's time to obey. Obey by building. Obey by simplifying. Obey by staying locked in when it gets hard, because it will. Obey when no one claps. Obey when no one checks in. Obey when no one gets it. Because the only person who needs to get it is you. You want to feel confident, then become consistent. You want to feel powerful, then live in alignment. You want to feel worthy, then do what you were made to do, without compromise. And if you fall, good. Obedience isn't about perfection. It's about returning. Returning to the path every time you drift. Returning to the mission every time you wander. Returning to the work, the standard, the calling again and again until there is no version of you left who hesitates. Because you've become the builder, not part-time, not when it's convenient, not when it's easy, but always. That's the power of obedience. It doesn't wear out. It builds endurance. It makes you resilient in storms and humble in success. Because you know your power doesn't come from outcome. It comes from obedience itself. And when you live like that, when obedience becomes your lifestyle, there's nothing that can stop you because nothing owns you anymore. Not fear, not distraction, not doubt. You are no longer waiting for permission. You are no longer begging for a plan. You are no longer asking the world to tell you who you are. You know, you've always known. And now finally you're ready to live like it. So move. Move without knowing. Move without needing. Move because your life depends on it. Because it does. Not just the number of years you live, but the quality of who you become in those years. You can't get that back. You can only move forward. One step, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. And if you do, if you obey when it's quiet, when it's hard, when it's invisible, you won't have to chase purpose ever again, because you'll have become it.